Sanjeev Sanyal, the global strategist at Deutsche Bank AG, joins us now. Sanjeev, good morning, and really good to have you on the show. It's a long while since we've spoken with you on this show. Just detail to us this massive shift you're talking about. I guess your report is based on Prime Minister Modi's call, manufacture in India or make in India. You see that as the definitional shift.
Yes, I think everybody agrees that this government is quite hard-working. The question is, what was their roadmap? And everybody's been thinking about that. But if you begin to listen to what he's saying and the actions his government are taking, it's becoming quite clear that there is indeed a coherent roadmap that they have. It includes manufacturing exports, it includes heavy infrastructure, urbanization, and so on. And when you put all of these pieces together, what you get is really emerging, looking very close to the East Asian model, which is basically about bulk deployment of labor, capital, and so on. But it's a well-trodden path. There are well-known risks, but it's a well-trodden path.
Okay. Sanjeev, hi, good morning. So can you flesh it out for us in terms of how much infrastructure will actually be needed for this manufacturing-led growth in the form of, power, fuel, etc.? And do we actually have enough wherewithal to boost it?
Obviously, there are reams and reams of reports, including in this one, which have made estimates about the amount of power, energy, etc. that will be required. There's no doubt about one thing, which is that if we go down this path, the growth trajectory will be much more material and energy intensive than has been the services driven growth path that we have had so far. So a lot more energy will be needed, a lot more materials will be needed. It's a much more grittier form of growth than the services driven path. But on the other hand, it's a path that if it works, it generates a lot more jobs than services did. I mean, that was the real problem with the services-driven growth model. It generated growth when going were good, but even then it was not generating jobs. And of course, then it slowed down. So that is really what the bet is.
Okay. There is certainly an argument in favor of make in India or manufacture in India simply because Chinese labor has become very expensive. Chinese inflation was very high. So clearly that opportunity advantage is there for India, especially with the currency now having depreciated. But Sanjeev, will we be really able to negotiate the many more problems that manufacturing will require? For instance, land acquisition. That stands as a very big hurdle at this point in time, a political issue. And India does not even have the kind of land luxury that China has. In terms of density of population, that's going to be a far more difficult task, even without the Land Acquisition Act. And then you have a democracy, a very voluble, a very argumentative democracy. And then there are other issues like environment, material-driven, manufacture-driven growth at this level of, environment concerns. You think this will succeed at all?
Well, it's, any path that was taken was going to be difficult. So the question is, can this one be done? It's a well-trodden path. The countries from Japan to the NICS to China most recently have done it. So that, I think, in that sense, it is a well-known strategy. As far as being densely populated, I wouldn't, that's not really a concern. I mean, Japan is hugely densely populated, and even China, the bits of China that drove the growth which is the eastern seaboard, is even more densely populated than India. So I'm not concerned about that. I agree, land acquisition, many of the other infrastructure issues are key. But I think the real risk in this, even if you sort out all the other things, the real risk in this is really the expansion of the financial system, because this whole thing is based on a continuous deployment of ever more savings and investment, and that'll have to be done by the financial system. So you'll have to expand the banking system, for example, by an order of magnitude from what it is now. And when you do that, obviously you'll make mistakes. There'll be misallocation, and how you handle that process is key. Even China and Japan, which succeeded in keeping growth going for decades, are still grappling with this issue. And of course, there are countries like the Southeast Asian countries which couldn't handle it and then had the Asian crisis in 1998. So this is really the key risk to the strategy, the financial expansion.
Okay. Apart from the financial expansion, as you point out yourself in the report, Sanjeev, a lot of the infrastructure bottlenecks will have to be cleared as well. So road construction will need to be beefed up, railway capacity will need to be tripled or so. How long do you think this will take, and how feasible do you think this is?
Well, this is where political commitment is key. That's why I said we need a roadmap where it's clear how important this whole process of infrastructure building is. And remember, it's not just from the supply side in terms of, clearing up the bottlenecks. This process of creating the infrastructure itself is growth. This is itself generating jobs. So in a sense, what you're trying to do here is create a self-sustaining virtuous cycle where you generate growth, you employ people, those people then get jobs, they get savings, they put the savings back into the banking system, you expand the banking system, you try and get these guys savings accounts, which is again a major initiative. As you know, we are going to, the Prime Minister wants 75 million new accounts, so this money goes back into those accounts, and then it gets fed back through the banking system, back into more infrastructure. So this is a virtuous cycle. He's trying to get it going. He's quite clear about this in his head, at least. The question is, of course, implementation. Your guess is as good as mine on that.
Yeah, actually, I mean, my guess is that it is very difficult to deliver, actually. Sanjeev, for the past 7 decades, our infrastructure and our public sector-led industrials have clearly failed in terms of productivity or in terms of competitiveness. Why should we succeed now? Why should the administration be able to deliver any better? Why did we go into services? Why did we have the TCSs and Infosys and the BPOs and the call centers? Simply because there you're not dependent on government, you're dependent on an external sector. Why should that change fundamentally? At the margin, this government may be a little more administratively capable, but can there be a paradigm shift?
Well, 2 things. One is that we never attempted this. We never attempted to generate growth through this process. So, for example, urbanization, a very key part of this whole model is deployment of labor, which will be all about sucking out labor out of the rural areas and deploying them. And urbanization is the way you do it. But for a very long time, in fact, essentially till very recently, we had the impression that urbanization was somehow a bad thing. That somehow we need to create employment guarantee schemes to keep people from not moving to the cities, because that was somehow cluttering up the cities and making a mess of it. Instead, now you have a completely different approach and saying, you know what, we'll build 100 new smart cities. That's a paradigm shift in the way we are thinking about the problem.
Okay. So what would you watch out for from here on? Do you see, would you watch out for savings rate changes, I-core changes, incremental capital output ratio? What exactly will be the parameters that you will monitor?
Well, obviously, one is just the pure implementation of many of these things. As I said, labor law reforms, which have not been discussed all these years, are suddenly on the table. So clearly, the government is serious about this. There is the business about building urban infrastructure. We'll be monitoring that. But as I keep pointing out, the whole thing is driven eventually by a massive expansion of the financial system, which has to be done, but it has to be done very carefully. So these are the parameters we'll watch. The migration process, the general governance issues, which of course Prime Minister Modi has promised many, many times. And if anybody can deliver it on it, it's perhaps him. But we need to actually see it happen. And of course, as I said, the financial system, which we will watch very closely.
Okay, I know your report is not intended to mention stocks, but basically, therefore, if you are an investing man, the bet should be on financial space. We should now, if you have a portfolio for over 5 years, there should be fewer TCSs and Infosys and more of infrastructure and more of financial services?
I think that would be a fair way of saying it. But as I said, one of the things about massive deployment of this kind of level of capital is how efficiently you do it, because it's quite possible that your return on investment actually declines as you expand investment. So the efficiency of this investment matters. It also matters how the banks, for example, deal with the fact that as they invest, some of it will go bad, even with the best of intentions, right?
Okay.
So how do you liquefy these through bankruptcy laws and so on? So these are the issues that we now need to begin. The problem of expansion is no longer the problem. The problem is managing expansion, which is a different set of problems.
Fair point. Sanjeev Sanyal, thank you for joining us and opening a whole new way of thinking and understanding what the government is in for. It was a pleasure speaking with you.